June 1944. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich was moving north through France to stop the Allied invasion. Behind its columns, men were left hanging from balconies, villages burned. And in Oradour-sur-Glane, 642 civilians were murdered in a single afternoon. Within a year, Das Reich would be shattered. The officer who led the operation at Oradour would be dead. 2 former division commanders would take their own lives. Another would be sentenced to death and never serve a day. So did Das Reich truly pay for what it had done? The answer depends on the difference between defeat and justice. To understand that difference, we have to return to where the pattern began. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, the formation that would become Das Reich was still being assembled. Its core came from the SS Verfügungstruppe, armed SS units raised outside the regular German army. That October, the regiments Deutschland, Germania, and Der Führer were brought together under Paul Hauser. In the field, the division took orders from the army, but its loyalty remained with the SS, the organization that enforced Nazi racial policy and controlled the concentration camp system. That distinction mattered. These were trained soldiers serving an organization that had already defined entire populations as enemies. In 1940, the division fought through the Netherlands and France. It moved quickly, fought aggressively, and was later reorganized and renamed. First Reich, then Das Reich. Its next campaigns would reveal what kind of formation it was becoming. In April 1941, Das Reich took part in the invasion of Yugoslavia. The organized campaign ended within days. The violence against civilians did not. Near Alibunar, in what is now Serbia, more than 200 civilians and prisoners of war were killed in reprisals. The logic was already clear. If German soldiers believed civilians had resisted, the entire community could be made to pay. That logic followed the division east and became even more destructive. On June 22, 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Das Reich advanced with Army Group Center through the fighting near Smolensk and toward Moscow. Soviet resistance held firm. German supply lines stretched across hundreds of miles. Then winter arrived. By the end of the year, the division had been badly mauled. One regiment began the campaign with roughly 2,000 men and finished it with just 35. By February 1942, Das Reich had recorded more than 10,000 casualties and losses since the invasion began. But the Eastern Front was more than a military disaster. It was where the division's war and Nazi ideology stopped being separate things. German forces had not come only to capture territory. Soviet prisoners were starved and shot. Jewish communities were rounded up and murdered. Villages suspected of sheltering partisans were burned. Men from Das Reich took part in that system. In September 1941, a support unit from the division assisted Einsatzgruppe B, one of the mobile SS killing squads operating behind the front, as 920 Jews were murdered near Minsk. We do not have most of their names. What remains is the number, and the knowledge that people who had done nothing but exist were taken to a killing site, while men attached to a division marching on Moscow helped secure the operation. That matters because what happened in France 3 years later did not come from nowhere. By 1944, Das Reich had spent years fighting a war in which the boundary between combat and mass murder had already been erased. After Moscow, the division was rebuilt and sent east again in 1943. It fought at Kharkov and Kursk. After Kursk, Germany had lost the strategic initiative, and Das Reich was withdrawn once more. This time, it went to France. By early 1944, Das Reich was based near Montauban in southern France. It was short on equipment, and many replacements had never seen combat. but much of its leadership had served in the east, where burning a village over suspected partisan activity had become routine. Then, on June 6th, Allied troops landed in Normandy, and Das Reich was ordered north. French resistance fighters cut rail lines, sabotaged communications, attacked isolated vehicles, and disappeared. Allied aircraft strafed the roads. Fuel shortages and breakdowns slowed the division's armor. Every ambush and every delay reinforced the same belief among its commanders: the population itself had to be frightened into submission. On June 8th, the German commander in the west ordered resistance to be crushed with severity and without leniency. A day later, Das Reich showed exactly what that meant. On June 9th, soldiers of the division entered Tulle after fighting between German forces and the resistance. Men were rounded up and screened. 99 were selected from the crowd. They were hanged in public from balconies and lampposts, then left for the town to see. Another 149 men were deported to Dachau. Most never returned. This was more than punishment. It was a warning to everyone still alive. Resist, and this is what follows. The next day, that warning reached a village that had barely felt the war. On the afternoon of June 10th, soldiers from the Der Führer regiment surrounded Oradour-sur-Glane, a quiet village near Limoges. People were eating lunch. Children were in school. Then the soldiers ordered everyone into the market square. Most assumed it was an identity check. 7-year-old Roger Godfrey knew to run. His family had fled Lorraine, and his mother had taught him to hide whenever German soldiers appeared. As the children were being led out of school, Roger escaped and hid. Every other child from his school was taken toward the center of the village. In the square, the men were separated from the women and children. The 197 men were marched in groups to barns and other buildings. The 240 women and 205 children were locked inside the church. Then the killing began. Machine gun fire cut down the men in the barns, and the buildings were set on fire. Some survived the first bursts and lay motionless among the bodies, waiting for a chance to crawl through the flames. Inside the church, soldiers used explosives and incendiary devices. As smoke and fire filled the building, women and children tried to escape through doors and windows. The soldiers shot them as they came out. Marguerite Roufanche climbed through a window behind the altar. She was hit by gunfire, but reached a nearby garden and remained hidden until the soldiers left. She was the only woman to survive the killing inside the church. 6 men survived the barns. Together with Marguerite, 7 villagers survived the massacre sites themselves. Roger and about 15 other residents escaped before the killing began or avoided the roundup by hiding. 642 people were murdered. Afterward, the SS looted the houses and burned the village. Before leaving, Adolf Diekmann, the officer who had led the operation, ordered his men not to discuss what had happened. German authorities later claimed that there had been a battle in the village and that the women and children died when resistance ammunition exploded inside the church. The physical evidence and the survivors told a different story. Why Oradour was chosen and who gave the final order to kill its inhabitants remain disputed. What is not disputed is what the soldiers of Das Reich did once they arrived. And Oradour was not the final atrocity. At Argenton-sur-Creuse, troops connected to the division killed another 67 people. Across the region, homes were burned, hostages taken, and civilians shot, while Das Reich was still moving toward the front. The methods practiced in the east had reached Western Europe. When Das Reich finally reached Normandy, it met an enemy that controlled the skies and was growing stronger on the ground. Allied aircraft attacked its supply columns. American and British forces destroyed its vehicles and threatened its retreat routes. Over the summer, the division lost men and equipment faster than it could replace them. On July 1st, it reported just over 17,000 personnel. By September 13th, that figure had fallen to about 12,350, nearly 5,000 fewer men in barely 10 weeks. But the division continued fighting. It returned to the Western Front during the Battle of the Bulge, then went east for Germany's failed offensive in Hungary. In May 1945, what remained surrendered to the United States Army. As a fighting force, Das Reich was finished. But the battlefield could settle only half of this story. Adolf Diekmann never stood trial. He was killed in Normandy 3 weeks after Oradour. 2 former commanders of the division took their own lives as Germany collapsed. Matthias Kleinheisterkamp died shortly before the war ended. Walter Kruger died 2 weeks after the surrender. No surviving record tells us exactly why. What is certain is that neither man ever faced a courtroom for crimes committed under his command. Heinz Lammerding survived. He had commanded Das Reich during its march through France. A French court convicted him and sentenced him to death in absentia. West Germany refused to extradite him, and he lived as a free man until his death in 1971. In Bordeaux in 1953, a French military court tried 21 former members of the division for crimes committed at Oradour and Tulle. 20 were convicted. 2 received death sentences. The others received prison terms. Within 5 years, amnesties and pardons had freed every one of them. Heinz Barth, an SS platoon commander who participated in the massacre, was later sentenced to life imprisonment in East Germany. He was released in 1997. Most of the men responsible for Oradour never faced trial at all. That is the contradiction at the center of this story. Das Reich paid on the battlefield. Its equipment was destroyed. Thousands of its men were killed, wounded, or captured. The division itself disappeared at the end of the war. But most of the men who carried out the killing never paid in a courtroom. Dying in battle is not a verdict, and the collapse of a military unit is not justice for the people it murdered. After the war, France chose not to rebuild the old village of Oradour-sur-Glane. A new village was built nearby, while the ruins were preserved. The burned houses remain. So do the rusting car, the ruined church, and the empty streets. They stand because the destruction of Das Reich could never answer what happened there on June 10, 1944. The division was defeated. Justice was incomplete. Oradour is not proof that everyone paid. It is a warning that victory can end a war without settling its moral debt. If someone in your family served with the Allied forces in France or fought in the Ardennes, leave their name, rank, and unit in the comments. Their story is part of what remained after the war. And if you are watching on television, scan the QR code on screen. It will open this same video on your phone so you can add their name below. Das Reich was destroyed by armies. But on that same front, one hidden rifleman could still stop an entire American unit. The Americans developed a brutal answer, one that could silence a hidden sniper in seconds, often without ever seeing him. That story is on your screen now.